It's a drum synthesis very much in vogue at the moment thanks to things like the Roland Era surfacing and also Machine 2 with its drum synth. And the Microtonic from Sonic Charge is a really good candidate if you're interested in synth sound design for drums. And it's got a great vibe. I've used it on many tracks, and I did a producer POV last night where I just went through some of the sounds and created them, and I didn't have the opportunity to do a voiceover because it was late at night. So this is where I'm going to get in there and explain some of the things that I'm doing. Okay, so I've got the Microtonic loaded here. You can see it. The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to go up and load up an EQ8. The reason for this is because I want to show you some of the frequency energy from 20 Hertz to 20 kilohertz on the spectrum analyzer, but also if I need to roll off some frequencies here because we're dealing with synthesis, we're dealing with noise, so this is stuff that's got a very rich energy across the frequency spectrum. I might need to tame it. So let's take a look. Just at the top here, numbers 1 to 8 are literally the drum sounds, so you can have 8 drum sounds in your kit, and that might sound a bit limiting, but to be honest, it's a great limitation. It's really good to reduce the amount of sounds that you can use in production sometimes, so that's cool. So we've got the mute buttons to turn the sounds off if we want to, and the parameters here are all about synthesizing the drum sound. We'll have a look at that soon. Down below you have the pattern section. So I'm going to start off with a kick drum. That means I'm just going to trigger on each beat here. Notice that the actual 16th step grid under here, the kicks are 1, 5, 9 and 13. If you're interested in what happens on the numbers on this grid and the relationship with swing and stuff like that, check out my black book sessions. And let's take a look. Let's have a listen. Mind your ears, by the way. If you're working on headphones, if you've got it loud, make sure you've got the volume knob handy because we are going to be dealing with some raw synthesized sounds. So there's the snare. Now, when I say a snare, it's kind of like a default snare patch. It's not the most attractive snare. I don't think even the guys at Microtonic would suggest that that's a snare. It is in fact literally a case of a mix of 50% between the oscillator, which is on the left hand side, and then the noise generator, which is on the right hand side. So you can see here oscillator and then noise generator. So this is a crossfader, so it's blending between the two. So look what happens if I move to the left. We end up with a sine wave, which is the oscillator that's on here. You can see on the spectrum analyzer that it has all of its energy at the fundamental frequency. So the frequency is set here. So you can see 523. If I put my mouse onto this, you can see, just getting my aiming right, you can see on the numbers there on the spectrum analyzer that that's correct. Let me just show you something. I'm going to take the oscillator pitch down. And it's really helpful. You know, we get, as you can see, you get the musical note as well. You can see F1, the frequency. So it's very useful. It's going down in a musical fashion here, stepping. So we go higher. Tons of scope. Okay, so look, that's the oscillator. Let's take it over to the noise generator. Now notice with the frequency display here, we've got energy across the spectrum from the lowest frequency on the left through the mids, the high mids, all the way up to the highs, and then at the very top here, this is where we've got 20k. All right, so that's a range that we can hear. It fills out that spectrum, so you have to be careful when you're working with noise, but it's a very popular sound. What they've got over here is a filter section that allows you to deal with that. So let me just show you something. At the moment this is set to a low pass filter, so I'll bring this down. Notice how on the spectrum we're losing the energy of the sound up on the highs here, and you can use your ears. You can hear we're losing brightness, rolling all the way down, and we've actually got ourselves almost a kick drum. It's kind of like a noisy, nasty kick drum. Just going to use the cue. Look at that. Got ourselves a kick. This is boosting at the frequency that I've got set. So I've filtered everything down, but I've now actually increased the amount of feedback at that frequency, which creates this interesting kind of tone. So look at that. Who would have thought that you can get a kick drum out of noise? But that's what it is. Lengthening decay, so we're hearing it for a longer time. But that's not what I'd encourage you guys to use for your kick drums, to be honest. That's what the oscillator's for. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the frequencies again, and let's take that cue down. Let's have a listen. Let's have a look at the other filter types. We've got a bandpass, and well, the cutoff's the center of the band that's allowed to be heard, and then above and below are reduced. Let's adjust the cue. It's such a lot of fun, this, you know. It's so easy to work with. And let's move over onto the high pass filter here. So really thinning the sound out, but be aware, up at the top on the highs, up at the 20k, it's very strong in energy, which means it's going to be quite harsh to listen to, and also it's going to be losing you headroom in the mix. All right, so I'll tell you what I'll do. Let me come down to my EQ8, let's turn on, and let's roll that down about 18k. I think that's going to be safe for us to do, so we're not losing the energy that we want to hear. We're just getting rid of the extra baggage way up high. So that's in case I want to use this with the high pass filter. So just bear that in mind, okay? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift this mix all the way over to the oscillator on the left-hand side. So we got ourselves a sine wave. Let me just show you if I switch the oscillator waveform type. Triangle. Frequencies. Lengthen. Attack to put a fade on the front. Almost sounds sidechain, doesn't it? Remember, you can automate these parameters as well. Get tons of control. But I'm going to start off with a sine wave. We're going to make a kick drum, alright? So a lot of the old classic electronic drum machines, their kick drums were made from sine waves. And what we use is something called pitch modulation. You can see that over here, you have different types of waveforms. And the two controls that we have for this are the amount, so how much pitch modulation, and then the rate, which is the speed of that pitch modulation. And what happens, if you imagine this graph here, it will go to a high pitch and then down to a low pitch. So the amount means, okay, look, you can see the numbers. So that's going to go plus 13 semitones and then back down to the oscillator pitch that we've got set here. All right. Now with a kick drum, we probably start off about 40 or so, 50 hertz. And what we would do there is we would then take it high pitch down to the 40 hertz. And that's going to give us this high to low pitch over a period of time that we set here. So I'm going to exaggerate that. I'm going to take it long. Have a listen what happens. Let's take the decay out so you can really hear that. So we've got high to low pitch. You can see that on the spectrum display here. So that's where the higher pitch is. It goes all the way down to the original pitch that we had set on the oscillator. I can reduce the amount so it's more subtle. But it tends to be that we don't have a slow decay. We tend to go for a faster decay down. So that's already starting to sound like a kick drum. So you adjust the decay how you want it in terms of the length of the sound. Just going to exaggerate this for you. So we're starting to get ourselves something that will vaguely resemble something like the 909 kick. Now I'm going to show you something else that we can do. Let me just check the frequency down here. Maybe go lower. There we go. So I'm going down to the actual pitch of the kick is 46.25 hertz. So that's F sharp 0 in terms of a musical note. And then with the pitch modulation, it's going plus 29 semitones. So that's pretty high, but it's adding that nice bite to the front of the sound. Now I'm going to add something else. We're going to use distortion. And this is adding that nice thud to the sound. It's making me feel now I just want to reduce that decay. And something to bear in mind when you're working with drum synthesis with kick drums is that if you've got a long decay, it's going to be quite tricky then to put other bassy elements on your track. So things like a bass line, toms, other sounds potentially could be impacted. So that's what's great about Microtonic is that you may start off with a long decay on the kick and it may be too long. Then what you do is whilst you're working on the track, you could reduce that decay and it's going to be tighter and it's going to sit better with the other sounds in the mix. So I'm just thinking maybe up a little bit. It's very easy to change your mind about this, and the one thing you want to bear in mind also is when you actually start making the music, the pitch of the kick can have an impact too. And when you start writing a bass line on top, the pitch of the kick does have an important role. So you may want to try to deliberately make that work musically. All right, so it's up to you. So I think maybe there. All right, so that's G0. That's a nice punchy kick, maybe just a little bit more. I do tend to start getting a little bit too OCD about this stuff, but whilst I'm talking about this, let's take a look at the EQ gain here. This is really useful. We can EQ the oscillator, so maybe we could bring out some frequencies. I'll show you what happens here. See that? We're boosting at 116. Let's roll this down, and we can cut. Kind of ruining the guts of the sound there. Maybe let's just roll that down a bit and lower this. It's really nice and thuddy, isn't it? I tell you what I need to do. Let me just check the levels here. Now that's cool. We're reasonably conservative here. I don't want to be clipping on the video, so I'm going to have to keep adjusting this. Right, let's have a look. I think for the moment that's good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to the next sound. And we're going to take a look at programming a clap on the 5 and the 13. So that's on every other beat. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So the 2 and the 4 in the grid, that's where the clap is going to go. Let's have a look at what we got. Okay, now we're starting to get a bit loud. Now we've got here, once again, the default setting. 50% oscillator, 50% noise. The same oscillator pitch as before, 523. So for a clap, actually what we want to do is shift the oscillator mix all the way over to the noise. And let's take a look at some options here. All right, so we have actually got a special envelope for claps which has this kind of multiple attack portion, and that's brought in by adjusting the speed of the attack over here. So let's take a look, let's see what we got. And at the moment it's got the low pass filter on it. I'm going to mute the kick. So we've got a burst of noise occurring. You can see that we've got some low frequency energy. So what I'm going to do is take this filter onto the high pass, bring it down. And you know, this is because I'm running in just a single output version. If I had the multi-output version, I might make different decisions, because then I could roll off the low frequencies on the actual channel for the clap. But here I'm using the high pass filter to thin the sound out safely, because I've got my high cut over here on the EQ as well. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this envelope and we're going to add those multiple attacks. There we go. Can you hear that? That's really exaggerated. Imagine how good that would be on some experimental tracks though, if you could modulate that in real time. And you can do, of course. You could map a MIDI controller to that. It's working quite nicely, a bit slack. Let's see how that feels with the kick. I'm going to roll the frequencies down a bit. And let's give it a bit of Q, let's boost. Reduce decay. That's working quite nicely as a clap there, but I'll tell you what we can do. We can add some stereo width. I'm going to leave it in mono for the moment. So I think it's working nicely. Maybe just a touch more decay. A little bit more. Not too much. So you can see how easy it is to get an OCD on this. So look, that's good. Actually, I'm just going to raise the filter frequency here and then tighten that down. There we go. That'll do for the moment. I might come back to that. So let's take a look now at sound 3. Let's do some hi-hats. So once again, oscillator mix all the way over here to the right hand side. And what I'm going to do here is we're going to go onto the high pass again. Let's roll this down, and I'm going to paint all the way across on all the 16ths. But this time I'm going to accent some of these. And for the accents to work, we need to actually adjust the level here. So I'm going to show you that in a minute. So first I'm going to program in the accents. And let me have a listen, just get a reference on where these are. Okay, let's try here and then maybe here. So they're all the same at the moment. Let me mute this. I'm going to bring the level down, shorten decay. And let's give them some life. So we do this by adjusting the amount the accent is affecting the actual oscillator. So when we bring this, when I say oscillator, I'm saying the noise generator actually. So when I do this, you'll listen that we're going to hear the accents at different volumes compared to the others. That's how it was before. So everything else is turned down, but the accents remain at same volume as before. So they're exaggerated. Creates a really nice rhythm. Let's try stereo. Really sits them quite nicely in the mix. And let's swing it. So this is the even numbered 16ths in the grid are moving to the right. The odd numbers stay in the same grid position. We don't see it, but that's what you're feeling when you listen to that. Okay, maybe let's thin them out. There we go. Maybe just a little bit less of that accent. Clap. Just going to shorten decay. So there we go. We got ourselves some hi-hats down. And next sound that I'm going to do is I'm going to bring on a tom. So a tom, it could be a mixture of noise and the oscillator. Let's take a look. The key thing about a tom is that it will have pitch modulation. And usually it's not so much as the kick, it's a bit more shallow. And we'll take a look at the options. So let's get something programmed in, and I'm going to have a think about where I want to place these. Okay, I'm going to place one here. Let's do one over here. There we go. So let's focus on the oscillator side of this. I'm going to reduce the pitch. Already that's sounding like a 808 conga, isn't it? You know, it's amazing. Let me reduce decay. But I'm going to lengthen decay. There we go. I'll tell you what's interesting about this. Look, that kick, the note is G0. Here's my tom, and I'm on F sharp 1. So there's a musical relationship between the kick and the tom that I'm creating. So it's just a kind of interesting observation. Going to use a pitch modulation. We're going to add some here. Just going to mute these over here. Can you hear that? Let me just slow that pitch mod. I think somewhere around here is quite nice. So we add that little pitch modulation at the beginning of the sound. Let's bring the kick. Maybe a bit more. Maybe lengthen decay. Be careful with the long decay because you might be affecting the kick frequencies. So once again, ideally multi-output would be good for this, but I'm really making it work in the single output at the moment. So that's working nicely. I want to add a little bit more character. Let's distort. And let's bring in some noise now. So to do this, I'm going to roll off the low frequencies because I don't want the clashing going on, but I'm going to take this about midway and let's see how that feels. Going to reduce the decay. Can you hear that we've got this nice bright punch at the front of the tom sound now? So adjust the oscillator. Just a little touch of noise there to give it some character. Let's see how these are all sitting now. Right, wicked. That sounded great. And I'm going to go for something a bit different here. Let's keep it on this kind of a vibe. I think we could go for something like an analog style conga. Like the 808 kind of vibe. So once again, over here to oscillator. Going to paint a whole bunch in. And this time we're going to do the oscillator affected by the accent. And I don't know what I'm going to do just yet. I'm just in fact just going to click on a few of these randomly, to be honest, and see what happens. So increase the amount and the frequency. Let's take it a bit higher, reduce decay. Okay, I'm liking that. The great thing about this is you can see is that I can get the musicality and get these beats to blend on a musical fashion. And this is a pure electronic kind of drum synth vibe. What you end up doing is you end up coming out with a sound that is definitely club friendly. It's going to have a really interesting energy on a big system. So you can clearly hear that it's really well suited to the more kind of stripped back electronic flavors, that's for sure. Okay, now let me add something new, and this is going to be, I'm looking for like an offbeat hi-hat to basically complement the existing closed hats. Alright, so that means we're going to come over here, going to go for that high pass filter again, and we're going to go longer, but we're going to change the envelope type this time and see how this feels. Just noticed that we are pushing into the output too loud, so I'm bringing this down. I'm going going to slow the attack here, so it's going to sit in a little bit more of a kind of shaker territory, really, I think. Try stereo. Just going to bring that clap up. Quite like that sitting in that stereo picture now, the clap. So you can see here that we've got a ton of possibilities in terms of what we can do. And let me just show you one more thing I want to do is just show you how we could do something a bit different with the pitch modulation here. And what I'm going to do is, let me just mute everything else for the moment. And this is where it starts to get into the more experimental realm of sound design on Microtonic. Possibly I'll end up doing a more advanced video. We'll see what happens, see if there's a demand for it. So I'm going to play something here. Maybe, let's do these guys here. Let me see. Right, 100% oscillator. I'm going to take the decay longer. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on the pitch modulation here to the sine wave instead of that envelope. And I'm going to take the rate and then I'm going to increase the amount. So have a listen. Now, how mad is that? Basically, what that is like a basic form of FM synthesis. So the original sine wave is being modulated by another here. So this is creating that real interesting radio kind of frequency. I was hearing almost some vowel sounds coming through. So that's just a little possibility. You can make bell-like sounds basically here. And of course, as you heard, using the MIDI controllers and modulation, you could come up with something way more interesting as well. So let me see if I can find something to complement the other sounds, some kind of bell sort of element. You'll notice that as I slow the rate there, it becomes a bit more dissonant. So you've got that more gong kind of bell-like texture coming through. So I'm going to stop there. Let me know if you guys want a more advanced video and I'll see if I can fit the time in. But you can see there that Microtonic is incredibly powerful for shaping sounds. The key advantage is the fact that you have this minute control over things like the actual pitches, which allows you to create musical sounding beats. And in some cases, you wouldn't actually need even to place a bass line on top because you have that bottom end filled out by these elements. So it's something else to consider. So definitely recommended for those on the more electronic tip, but equally, those of you who are making stuff that's a bit more kind of musical, organic, maybe soulful, there may still be a place for something like this. It's a fantastic drum machine.